What a year 2023 was. Nigeria's political landscape was agog with events all year. Not unexpected, 2023 was Nigeria's election year. We got a new president, President Bola Ahmed Tinubu. And we said goodbye to former President Muhammadu Buhari after 8 years in office. His assumption of office saw the removal of the fuel subsidy, and that in itself is the biggest story in the country. We are all still dealing with its ripple effects. We had off-cycle elections and the controversies those elections brought along with them. New governors for the 36 states and a minister for the FCT. New lawmakers, 469 in total, both brand and returning. New ministers taking charge of 35 ministries, 9 more than we had under former President Muhammadu Buhari. Controversies in Rivers State and Ondo State. Lots of legal issues that have seen the governors in Zamfara, Kano and Plateau still slightly unstable on their seats. It's been quite a year. Civil society had their hands full with advocacy all year, and my guests will be assessing how well we've done as a people in this full hour of frank conversation. Hello and welcome to the very first edition of Political Paradigm for 2024, right here from our Abuja studios on Channels Television. I am Kayla Magwa. My guest on the program is Mr. Clement Nwankwo, a lawyer and human rights activist in Nigeria. He is the Executive Director of Policy and Legal Advocacy Center and convener of Civil Society Situation Room PLAC. He is recognized as the first Nigerian to establish a human rights organization, starting his democracy and good governance activism during the dark days of the military dictatorship in Nigeria. After the establishment of the Independent National Electoral Commission, INEC, in 1998, in preparation for the conduct of elections to return Nigeria to civil rule, he founded the Transition Monitoring Group, a coalition of over 50 organizations that works for the return of civilian rule in Nigeria. And keeping that civil rule in check has been his focus since then. Mr. Clement Nwankwo, welcome to Political Paradigm.
Thank you, Kayla. My pleasure.
Happy New Year.
Same to you.
I mean, it's been a very interesting 2023. And of course, we expected all of the ups and the downs, in 2023. But, I want to talk about the role of civil society. I think people don't understand the bridge that civil society is between, the state and its people. How would you say civil society fared in 2023?
I think civil society has undertaken or taken the role of keeping an eye on what is going on, reporting to citizens, but also advocating the cause of citizens, bringing to the attention of government issues of concern to citizens. And I think civil society has done quite well in it. I think that when you look at all of the issues that came up in 2023, whether it's the elections that civil society expressed very serious concerns about, or the economic situation in the country, or even the entirety of governance, I think civil society has continued to do quite a lot to raise concerns. And that's the role of civil society. Ours is not to praise the government. Ours is to say to the government, these are issues of concern. And the hope we have is that when we say those things, government understands why it is being said. And no one says these things because you are interested in denigrating a government or undermining a government. You are saying this because you want a better society. And sometimes government does very well. And we say, look, this is really good action that you have taken. So it's been a mix. I think that for civil society, just like for the rest of Nigerians, it's been a difficult 2023. We saw more Nigerians descend down the poverty ladder. We've seen increased poverty. We've seen increased insecurity. We've seen increased hardship. What we haven't seen is where the hope lies. Where are we headed? I think for a lot of people, there's a major concern about that.
For 2023, the levels of advocacy that had to be done in several areas, would you say that the government was able to address a lot of the issues that were raised by civil society?
Well, 2023 has seen a mix. Two different governments come in. One, of course, well, both belonging to the same party, but we did see the departed Muhammadu Buhari regime, where a lot of Nigerians are thankful that that regime ended, of course, constitutionally. When the new administration came in, I think the citizens were expectant. Given the several abuses that we suffered under General Buhari, I think that when you now have a new president, people's hopes rise. But I'm quite worried that those hopes are yet to be met. Citizens' expectations are yet to be met, and we can talk about the different ramifications of this. But certainly, I think it's a time that people are asking and hoping that this trauma that they are going through in the country will be addressed and will be short-lived.
So a mix. So let's say 5 over 10. 1 being absolutely terrible in terms of advocacy, and 10 being, you know, absolutely wonderful. So
well,
are we saying a 5 here?
I'm not gonna rate it, because I think that for a lot of Nigerians, it's been a mixed situation. And if you're measuring by the economic indices, the economic situation of people, then I think over 10, 5 would be really too high. I think for a lot of people, the descent into poverty has been very, very traumatic. And we're looking at the government and asking, will this government understand that people are suffering? Will this government understand the important need to understand what the concerns of people are at this time? When a government comes in, and you know, the subsidy regime under President Buhari was a scandal, and then the subsidy of the naira was also a scandal. But then you come in, you immediately remove subsidy, so petrol prices jumped from 100 and something right up to 500, and now it's 600 plus. When you then also see the contradiction in removing the subsidy of the naira, it means that it was double jeopardy for the citizens, because the value of the naira dropped really sharply. Subsidy was removed. So the combined effect of these harsh economic decisions has been the major issue for Nigerians in 2023.
2023 was a really hard year. It was a very hard year for Nigerians. It's still hard. It's still hard in 2024. You know, one of the questions people had, especially with the removal of fuel subsidy, was the country ready for it? I know you've been an advocate for the removal of fuel subsidy over the years, as have many people in civil society, because it just wasn't clear and we didn't quite understand what this was about. You know, but was the country ready for it? Some have said that the infrastructure necessary to cushion the impact of such a removal just wasn't in place. So even if we're comparing the oil prices in Nigeria with that around the world, the truth is that in other places in the world, my sister stays in the US, and she was telling me, oh, we're doing $4.30 a liter here. Oh, but I don't use my car anymore. I have public transportation. So the things that help you handle the removal of that fuel subsidy and the cost of everything going up as a result of that, those cushions were not in place, were they, in Nigeria? Many people feel it wasn't in place, and so they shouldn't have done it yet. What do you think? No, it wasn't going to be in place. I mean, to build an infrastructure that addresses the issue of transportation will take years, but certainly not the amount of years Lagos State took, for instance, to do rail line. Almost 20 years. That's incredibly scandalous. This country can put in place infrastructure for transportation that should take no more than 7-8 years, that would be able to build massive rail lines across the country, build massive sea or river transportation, or build the roads that have not been built, or fix so much that has gone wrong. I'm not quite sure if we have even started thinking about it. And what you need is not an amelioration. You need deliberate action to deal with the consequences of what has happened.
which is the rapid or sharp rise in petrol prices. When you don't have that in place, then it's never going to be easy for citizens. Petrol prices are not going to come down as long as the naira continues to be devalued. The refineries are still in its own confusion. Part of rebuilding the infrastructure is that you are able to produce your fuel or petrol in Nigeria. The Dangote or so-called Dangote refinery is still a mirage. No one knows where it is headed. No one even knows the true story of what that Dangote refinery is about. The government is still talking about funding the rebuilding of Port Harcourt refinery, Kaduna refinery, Warri refinery. The government should not. After the wastages we have seen with those refineries, the government should absolutely hands off those refineries. Left to me, you should just simply ring a bell and whoever catches the refineries first goes into production. You probably don't even need to sell those refineries for any profit. You should just simply find someone who you can hand over. Some of those refineries have obsolete equipment anyway, but find someone, some serious investor to hand over, and whatever the government sells, it should be monetized into equity and handed over to a private interest to run.
So between 5 to 8 years before we remove fuel subsidies, is that what you're saying? No,
the fuel subsidy should have gone and has gone. And I don't think, but the reality today is that there is still fuel subsidy. And that's what the jeopardy is for Nigeria. If you look at the indices, the exchange rate, you look at the consumption, and you look at the actual landing cost of imported petrol, you will see that the government is still paying refinery subsidy costs. And if the government is still paying subsidy as we speak, the question is, why was it removed in an atmosphere of opaque economic reality that the country is faced with? So fuel subsidy is not gone, it's still there. And that's part of a dilemma for Nigeria.
Yeah, they explained it to us. They said there are different types of subsidy. So there are some that have been removed and there are some that are still being paid.
No, what we have seen is that the government became worried about the consequences of allowing the exchange rate to determine the cost of petrol. And that's why the cost has frozen at a particular point for several months now. The reality is that what we are buying petrol today is lower than the actual selling cost if we use the government's template. Citizens have said to government, let us see this template. As you know today, the sole importer of petrol is the NNPC, which we don't know what NNPC is anymore. Is it still a government corporation? If it's still a government corporation, then it means that it's still mired in the same inefficiencies and corruption that it was before. If it's a private enterprise, then how did you decide who should be the directors, who should be the chairman, who should be really managing the NNPC? Do you privatize NNPC and take the same old structure that was corrupt and absolutely ineffective and incompetent and put them over to manage a
and change their titles?
Just simply change their titles. This government should have swept out the NNPC leadership and put in a private sector-driven leadership that will be accountable.
So remove Melekari, remove...
I don't want to mention names, but I think that if anybody was part of the system that was corrupt and ineffective and inefficient, then they shouldn't be part of a privatized NNPC.
It's actually very interesting. I want to talk about... You know, this concern you raised about the fuel subsidy removal. I'm hoping that you saw that video of Emir Sanusi, where he said, "Where are the dollars? Where's the money?"
Well, Emir Sanusi is asking the same question all of us are asking.
Because I have heard him. Where is the money?
Yeah.
What is going on here?
What's going on in NPC? Nobody knows, and this administration shouldn't continue in the same corruption that Buhari was. It shouldn't continue in the same style that Buhari was. It shouldn't continue in the same style that Buhari pretended to know nothing that was going on. This is a new administration. Nigerians are angry. Nigerians are upset. The country is still being managed in the same mold as the previous regime was managing it. And I don't think we can go too far with this type of leadership.
You think it's very similar?
I don't see what the difference is. And I don't think Nigerians see what the difference is.
Just that things are more expensive.
Well, certainly that's a different conversation. But certainly, I don't think that, you know, if you're earning the same amount of money as you were earning 6 months ago or a year ago and living in this country, then you must really understand that again, using the word trauma, that this poses for Nigerians.
It's interesting that you brought that up, because it's not just about the Japa syndrome, is it? A deterioration in the quality of your life.
A serious deterioration.
Can cost you your life. It can cost a lot of people their lives. But we'll get to that conversation in a bit. It is a very worrisome conversation. I think, you know, we'll circle back to it. But I want you to talk about something that the government just did recently, and I'm looking at it right now, a halving in the cost of transportation for travelers during this Yuletide. Luxury buses, you know, they gave us some, it's not all of them, they gave us some particular companies, and they said, oh, you know, we paid some money, you don't have to pay all of it. Some people have criticized that as not being a priority. What do you make of this intervention and the concept of palliatives? Because it is counting as one of the palliatives of the government as a cushion for the impact of the removal of fuel subsidy. Your take on this particular intervention and just palliatives in general. How do you feel about them?
You know, momentary, episodic interventions go to nowhere. For a lot of people, if they don't have the money, they could decide not to travel. And a lot of wise people at this time are not traveling. And it's not just the cost of transportation. The insecurity, so how does the government intervene with insecurity? That's what you should tell us first. How does a bus traveling
What sort of palliative are you giving in that regard?
Exactly. How does a bus traveling from Lagos to Kaduna or Kaduna to Onitsha or Owerri, how do you protect people in those buses? So for people, it's not just the cost, it's the security implications of traveling. It's being in your community, in your village, and surviving the challenge of insecurity, armed robbery, kidnapping, and so on. We have no sense that the government has even begun to address the insecurity problem in this country. It went really bad under General Buhari. It hasn't stopped. It's still very bad, perhaps even worse. There is no sense that this government has started to tackle the insecurity problem. Oh,
security people will not agree with you. They bring out a lot of, they do briefings, bi-weekly briefings. I go for those briefings myself, where they say, oh, we've captured so-and-so kingpin, we've killed so-and-so terrorist kingpin, or so-and-so neighborhood is safer.
I worry about killing kingpins, because I think that the most important thing in a country is justice. And when you say you have killed everyone, don't forget that we had someone called Shekau who was killed more than 20 times by the military. Nobody hears the name anymore, but that's not evidence that he's dead, whoever he is. I think that you shouldn't be killing people unless in combat. If you have captured people...
They say yes, they say these are combat situations.
Well, you and I know what happened in Kaduna recently.
We will get to Tudumbiri in a bit.
So for me, I think that each time you put out those stories of capturing people or killing people, it doesn't address the security question.
We'll get to security.
We want to see the military arrest people. We want to see the military take them to court. We want to see those trials open so that people can understand that you have a mechanism for arresting bandits and kidnappers and killers. And when you talk about kidnapping, today people get kidnapped. The kidnappers demand ransom. Sometimes the story has been that some of this ransom is paid into bank accounts. They take the money and nobody does anything. Some of these demands for money are made through phone calls. Nobody gets arrested. Sometimes when you go to the police would say to you, look, you should cooperate with them. So for a lot of Nigerians, this story about killing bandits or killing terrorists and so on, it's lost its meaning, and the military should stop telling us about people they kill. They should start telling us about people who have been arrested for crime, and terrorism is a serious crime. We want to see them charged to court. We want to hear the evidence that has been collated, and the prosecution secure a conviction where they are guilty. But please, I am not interested, and I think a lot of Nigerians are fed up with stories about people being killed by the military.
We'll come back to the military because we do have to discuss Tudunbiri and that accidental bombing. But I want you to get your thoughts on palliatives in general. Let's go back there. There are many economists who do not like the word palliative. In fact, we did a special one time where we found out that palliative is actually a trigger word for Nigerians because they hear about them, many hear about them but don't really see them, and then the ones that we do see are the ones that people are showing on social media that seem a little embarrassing. When it comes to palliatives from the government, how do you feel about them?
The World Bank just released a report that said you have half the population now sink below the poverty line. We're told that 100 million Nigerians are under the poverty line. The poverty line is defined by how much money people earn a day. And if 100 million Nigerians, if we are to accept 200 million as the population of this country, being below the poverty line means the question, who are you giving palliatives to? 100 million people? What's the evidence of that? Who is monitoring it? How many of this 100 million people have you reached, and who, as a result of the palliative you have given to them, been lifted out of poverty? A country's growth level is determined by how many people you have empowered to climb out of the poverty line. Countries take decisions that within X number of years, they would have people earning income in certain brackets. Countries take pride in the amount of millionaires and billionaires their economy creates. Here in this country, public service, the economy, government seems to be so much interested in decimating the population of those who can afford things. Government policies, government taxation, virtually everything government does is aimed at undermining people's ability to rise above the poverty line. You are running a business, by the time you set up your business, you have all manners of tax collecting agencies of government. You are driving on the streets of even Abuja, the Federal Capital Territory. You would see people in different kinds of uniforms jump in front of your vehicle, demanding taxes. I've never seen that happen in any civilized country in the world. But in Abuja, you have multiple officials on the highway disrupting traffic, some with nails on sticks, stopping cars. It looks like once you set up a business, it becomes a target for government officials. And that's why you see sometimes when laws are made, some fund is being set up and someone says, let's tax companies 5% of their profits or 1% of their profits. These individuals did not set up their business for you to tax them. But in this country, you have multiple laws that says, whether it is education trust fund or police trust fund or this or that, taxing companies. Everyday companies are folding up. So the government must, and I'm happy that President Tinubu set up a committee or commission to look at taxation in this country. We want to see that being implemented so that people can become creative and be able to earn income, build up themselves, because once these companies are flourishing, they'll hire more people. But in recent months, a lot of businesses have shut down. A lot. And they've shut down for different reasons. Multiple taxation. The price of diesel has gone up to prices that nobody can even begin to think what it is now. Price of petrol, virtually everything. The infrastructure has collapsed. And then the price of insecurity. So this country has not started to address growth issues.
I mean, I'm looking at Nigeria's inflation figures right now, 2.11% in July of last year. That's
what it increased
2023. By. It's up by 0.07%. And the average 12-month annual inflation rate was about 19.18% for the 12-month ending in August of 2023. So that's 4.38% higher than the 14.80% that was recorded in August of 2022. What should the government be doing differently?
I think you measure your interest rates, and I don't know whether these are MBS figures.
Yes, from the MBS.
Certainly, I think that we have to be honest about what inflation rate is in this country. A lot of us who...
Oh, you think it's worse than this?
I think it's far worse than this.
But this is from the MBS.
These are official figures.
Yes, from the Nigerian Bureau of
Statistics. You go to shop and you know how much you were paying for one commodity a month ago and what it is today. It's incredible. It's incredible. You go to buy air conditioners, for instance. Air conditioners jumped in price by more than 25% within a space of 1 month. And that's people who can afford it. You go to buy a fan, it's the same thing. You go to buy foodstuff, it's the same problem, where you even see the foodstuff. So these are figures that the MBS puts out, wonderful, but the reality for the ordinary Nigerian is that the inflation rate today is almost immeasurable. It's too high. And you can see that by also the cost of borrowing money. You are borrowing money at 23, 24%. If you're lucky, 22%. What kind of business are you doing that you would borrow that amount of money, make profit to be able to repay?
I mean, we're seeing another ripple effect, which is in the increase in fake products. We're seeing people deciding to circumvent the system. Let's just create ours at the expense of others, you know.
Well, fake products, but don't forget that the CBN was warning the other day about fake Naira itself. So you have fake currency trying to buy fake products, and you can understand what it means for the economy. I don't think we have and I'm not being political here, but I don't think that government has in any way understood what needs to be done to improve the Nigerian situation. I think that if the government understands what needs to be done, then the problem will begin to be tackled. I think that
it does feel a lot like we're treating symptoms, doesn't it? We go to Abia State and we close down the shops, arrest the people that are making the fake drinks. So, something led to this. Yeah, no, and as much as I want to be able to look at this, doesn't justify it,
Kaylee, nothing justifies
it, but
anybody.
There is a root cause. That is what the conversation going on right now is. As much as these are evil people who could do this to their fellow countrymen, the truth is that you have to be able to... Is that what we're doing with security, isn't it? We're dealing with every symptom except the root cause, which is poverty.
There are fake products all over the world. In every country, there would always be people who will manufacture things of lesser quality for higher profit. So for me, I think that that's a major issue in this country. But you should provide the environment for people to manufacture. What you see today is that manufacturers are shutting down. Look at GlaxoSmithKline that just shut down. Look at what's it called now? Is
P&G?
Yes.
Procter & Gamble.
Procter & Gamble. That just, and these are the very prominent international manufacturing businesses. A whole other ones.
Wow, Procter & Gamble shut down?
Yeah, and you can see the consequence of that on different household products, on medical costs. You know, I was shocked.
Sanitary things, for especially women.
For women, exactly. So, you know, you go to the hospital, you get prescribed a medicine that used to sell for 3,000. Now you go to buy it, it's 25,000. All in a space of how many weeks? And the main reason is not even just the economic situation. It's officials of states who believe that when you set up a business, they have a share in it. They will attack you. They would come to your premises. They would make all sorts of demands on you. Some would say that they are shutting you down because you don't have fire extinguisher. Some would come and say they are shutting you down because you have not done environmental impact assessment. Some will come and say they are shutting you down for all multiple sorts of reasons. And this is not just one agency doing this. It's virtually every agency. So you could have the fire brigade show up in your office and shut you down. You could have the customs walk into your office and shut you down. You could have virtually every agency of government walk into your office and shut you down. How can a country develop this way, where there is arbitrariness, nobody's in charge of anything, people feel they can do what they like, there is nobody to call anybody to order? No country progresses the way that Nigeria is going. And the sad thing for all of us as a people is that whether it is the fire brigade or the NDLEA or the NAFDAC or the local government agencies, tenement rates, whatever it is, whichever one it is, when this person does it, the other person who may be in a different agency is suffering it as well. So combined, they all inflict on all of us, including themselves, the pains of arbitrariness that government represents.
Let's move on to security, because that is one of the biggest issues right now. As we're looking at 2024, you know, we have heard promises from the military after the Tudumbiri accidental bombing. Investigations are ongoing. They're going to make this clear to the people. We're going to make sure that everyone involved in this, you know, faces the full wrath of the law. We heard this from the military. We saw a gesture of good faith from lawmakers. So let's give our December salaries to the families of victims. Well, I have seen civil society say more, a review of your operations. So the military said, look, we have a modus operandi with communities. If communities are known to have bandit or terrorist movements, we have some kind of response mechanism where they let us know so that we can differentiate between innocent civilians and you know, these non-state actors. But this wasn't done in Tudumbiri. Nevertheless, we are sorry. And we are investigating. Is that enough? What should the military be doing differently?
Tudumbiri wouldn't be the first time this has happened.
Even in 2023, it wasn't the first time.
It has happened
in
repeatedly.
January. It was January of 2023. It happened in Nasarawa State as well.
I mean, Nasarawa, it happened in Imo State recently, where communities were burnt down by aerial attacks. I'm a lawyer, and as a lawyer, I have been taught from law school that it is better that 9 guilty persons go away free, get away, than for 1 innocent person to be killed. Even if you had bandits there, there is no justification for killing innocent people.
They said it was a mistake, Mr. Nwankwo.
It was a mistake, yeah. So who made the mistake? Have you suspended the person from functions? Who made that determination? Have you decided who it is?
And if they have made that decision, can they tell the people? Because, you know, it's one thing to say we're investigating, and another thing for Nigerians to say we can see that you're investigating.
What are you investigating? People were killed. You could see the children. What you needed to say is that this particular set of soldiers or military personnel carried out an attack that turned out to have incurred fatalities. They made a mistake. We have apprehended those that made the mistake. We have suspended them from duty, and further investigations are continuing. Now you tell us who they are. Or let's assume you don't want to tell us who they are. You tell us how many they are, what they constitute, and what interim disciplinary action you've taken. Once you announce that and say that you have further investigations will conclude in 2-3 weeks, and you would take further action. We would say that. But to go and say, who are you donating the money to? Okay, there are survivors. But people have died. You can't bring them back to life. You can't bring them back to life. So what you must do is to make sure that this does not recur. But in Nigeria, these mistaken bombardments have happened. People have been killed. You have the use of intelligence. And that's really the most important thing. If you can deploy intelligence, and I know that the military has some of the best officers, support them to implement a system of combating terrorism and banditry with intelligence. Nigeria is paying monies to some Chinese-hosted satellites that is supposed to have wide coverage of Nigeria. Every year, this country pays millions of dollars for satellites. We don't know whether it exists or not, who is hosting it, what reports comes back on it. Some agencies of government are supposedly working on this. Salaries are paid. There is no output. There is not enough evidence to show that this country's payment to a Chinese company is not a drain on our resources. And it goes to the point I say about leadership. I think that the president needs to assert leadership in this country, and I don't see that yet. There's no leadership in the country.
Let's move on now to other issues that civil society have been up in arms against, about really in 2023, one of them being capture of our electoral body. We saw, you know, everybody across board start to scream the moment we found out that there were some resident electoral commissioners who were card-carrying members of political parties. You know, and then, of course, with the off-cycle elections and with the general elections, we have seen civil society criticize how we are running the elections and dissatisfaction across board on how these elections were run. Talk to us a bit about these issues and what INEC should be thinking about, because we do have some elections this year. Ondo and Edo states will be going to the polls. What are they doing wrong, really?
I don't think that it's just simply a case of appointing card-carrying members into the commission. It's a case of members of the commission taking sides with politics. That's what it is. In 2019, the Civil Society Situation Room raised concerns about the elections in 2019. I was convener at the time, and we raised very serious concerns about the elections in 2019. And we said that that election was flawed. And we looked at all that we found out during observation. We took reports from other colleagues who were observing elections, and we pursued an advocacy strategy to create or support the emergence of a new electoral act in 2022. And we thought that that was going to be a solution. The Electoral Commission said it had also observed the flaws from 2019 and was prepared to make changes. And then it issued its own regulations to guide it. And part of those regulations included that we could now use technology more. The Electoral Commission now said it was going to have a result viewing portal. It created that portal. All of these were changes that was to lead to very well conducted 2023 general elections. But what we saw was that the elections in 2023 turned out to be worse than the 2019 elections that we were criticizing. So nothing changed other than for the worse. I observed the elections in this country in 2007, and I was together with a lot of international observers, including President Jimmy Carter, including Madeleine Albright, the U.S. Secretary of State. And we saw how in 2007, INEC had only received results from 12 states out of 36 states plus Abuja. It had only received results from 12 states and then proceeded to announce the results of the 2007 elections. Everyone knew that it was a fraudulent election. Even the man who became president from that elections acknowledged and said he was going to reform electoral system. And he kept to his promise to a large extent. He set up the Electoral Reform Committee headed by Justice Uwais. That committee went around the country, had very distinguished Nigerians in it, made recommendations. Some of the recommendations are still not implemented. But when Professor Tahiru Jega, who was a member of that commission, was appointed as chairman of INEC, we saw improvements. The elections in 2015 also saw improvements. But since that elections in 2015, the country has descended back to 2007. The elections of 2023, and I'm not being political here, I say this because I have no interest in any of the political parties, but elections of 2023 was badly flawed, of the same magnitude as happened in 2007. Perhaps even worse, because what 2023 elections introduced was ethnicity of the worst order, where people were physically barred from going to their polling units because of their ethnicity. It had never happened in this country before. So those who have benefited or profited in triumph of the 2023 elections must recognize that this country is sinking politically. And we cannot go to the elections in 2027 with this sort of electoral system. President Tinubu must understand that we cannot, our democracy will collapse if we think we can go forward with the electoral system we have today. And what are the challenges? How do you appoint partisan elements into the commission? How do you ensure that only persons who can be held accountable are appointed into the Electoral Commission? How do you create a voter register? Because as we speak, this country has no voter register. Don't mind what anybody tells you. I know that this country has no credible voter register. How do you create a sustainable voter register for this country? How do you ensure that the agencies of government who are stakeholders in the elections, the police, the military, paramilitary, other agencies, how do you ensure that they do not become partisan? How do you appoint the chairman of INEC? How do you appoint the national commissioners? What is the use of resident electoral commissioners? As you point out, in Adamawa, the resident electoral commissioner was announcing, similar to the way it was in 2007, results of governorship elections without the results. How do you get past all of this? And if anybody ever imagines that you would have an election in 2027 with this type of system, then that person is extremely naive and does not understand the danger we are moving into. You talk about Edo and Ondo. The last 3 governorship elections in Kogi, in Imo, in Bayelsa was a farce. In Kogi, there were results showing that the results sheets were prepared even before voting started. In these 3 states, in some areas, the results sheets that were uploaded on IREV had the same handwriting across the states. How could that have happened? So the present electoral system is completely abused. It cannot stand, and President Tinubu needs to do what is right for this country by admitting, and it has nothing to do, we have gone past the question of disputation about whether, the Supreme Court has made its decision for whatever reason, that's gone. President Tinubu must come to the reality that the country's electoral system is in serious crisis. And this, as it is constituted, cannot conduct elections in 2027. And I'm not talking of the individuals, just about the individuals. I'm talking of the electoral system as we have today cannot carry our democracy forward.
I mean, I like to play a little bit of political science on this program from time to time, so let's play.
Okay, go ahead.
The idea that the president is the one appointing resident electoral commissioners in the first place is the first domino.
That's what the Electoral Reform Committee, headed by Justice Uwais, talked about. He talked about the methodology, the process of appointing INEC national commissioners, INEC chairman. and put it into a process that involved, and they identified the NJC. I have a different view, but they identified the NJC as the mechanism to throw off people. Kenya went through the same electoral crisis as Nigeria, to the point that even the Supreme Court of Kenya annulled the elections. Even the person that was elected as president was charged to the ICC, and he attended the ICC, the International Criminal Court, as a sitting president. He escaped conviction, but part of the allegations against him was promoting ethnicity that led to killings. Kenya went through that process. Its democracy is stronger today because they went through reforms as well. And the process of selecting or electing, even Kenya had to elect in time because its judiciary also went through a crisis. I mean, the same way Nigeria's judiciary is in crisis today.
When everyone talks about Mr. Fubara and they talk about Wike and they talk about this impasse and this truce, many people do not agree with the word truce here because it felt like one side won. But this truce that has been reached, and watching him, you know, in 2023, after that truce was made, and he said, "Oh, there's no price too much to pay for peace, and I'll continue to pay that price." You know, watching all of that happen in Rivers State, one of the thoughts that kept coming to my mind is governance. While all of this is going on, I'm listening to the things you're saying. Maybe it's just me, but I'm listening to you talk to me, and you're telling me how I installed this person. Are you saying, so my votes didn't count? That's the first thing that you're saying to me as a citizen. You know, oh, I brought this person in. Oh, really? So my vote was of no importance. And then I'm watching all of this going on, and I'm wondering, am I even cared for at all as a citizen of this state? Do I matter? And I'm sure I'm not the only one who feels this way, because everything is not about just how things are politically. There's a governance side of things. Could you talk to us a bit about this impasse and what it's doing to governance and the people of Rivers State?
Well, let's not forget that Rivers State elections, or the elections in Rivers State, was very, very seriously criticized by election observers. And I know that because the report issued by the Civil Society Situation mentioned Rivers State as a concern. So it's not like you had a governor elected on a very fantastic elections. Sometimes also when people are the underdogs, they win sympathy. And that might be what is going on, not necessarily because you had the people elect a particular person. What may be happening today is that the interpretation of Rivers is that Fubara is an underdog who is being trampled upon by his so-called godfather. I think you would always have citizens react the way they are reacting. And then the politics of Rivers State as well. This is a governor who has emerged from a particular area that has not produced a governor. And so you have all of that split that has come into the state. So my worry is that if this is not understood in the context of all of this, then we would have a problem that were his godfather to proceed to force his removal, the consequences could be really very tragic for our democracy.
Is that what you think the end game is?
I don't know what the end game is, and I really hope that people who have their games going on in Rivers understand that what is playing out in Rivers is not just a Rivers situation. It has wide national implications. Of course, constitutionally, if you were to come into discussion about the constitutionality of what is going on, if the constitution is very clear, a governor can defect to a party that he chooses. The constitution allows a governor to defect.
However,
a president can defect. That's why Vice President Atiku defected and remained in office. The Constitution allowed that. But a legislator cannot defect, whether you're a State House of Assembly member or a National Assembly member. The Constitution is very clear. The only condition under which you can defect is if you show that there is a division within your political party. And that division must be very clear and understood by everyone. So if you do have 26 or 27 members of the State House of Assembly defect, it has its own constitutional implications. But again, what constitutes a quorum of a State House of Assembly? Does 4 constitute a quorum? So there's a whole lot of constitutional issues that arise from what is going on in Rivers. But if anyone at all thinks that Rivers is confined to Rivers, then they have no understanding of where we are headed with what is going on. The country is tired, the country is angry with politicians, citizens are suffering, and then you are in all of this, I wouldn't call it childish shenanigans, but you are in all of these shenanigans. I think we have to be very, very cautious with Rivers. Just your hopes for 2024. What would you like to see before the end of the year? What I would like to see is a president who is able to step away from the people who surround him to understand what the country is going through. I don't think it's understood. I think what we see is business as usual. You have the old guard taking out a new guard come in and continue in the same way as the old guard. It's like a change of guards and it's our turn now. This president must step away from it is our turn and understand that citizens are suffering incredibly. And if it is not understood, there will come a time when the citizens will say, we the citizens, it is our turn as citizens to take out our anger against the system. Well, that's all the time we have for Political Paradigm this week. But I want to thank you very much, Mr. Clement Nwankwo, for being with us on the program, and good luck with all you have ahead of you this year. Thank you, Kayla. We have been speaking with Mr. Clement Nwankwo, the Executive Director of Policy and Legal Advocacy Center and former convener of the Civil Society Situation Room plaque, lawyer and human rights activist. That's Political Paradigm this week. Join the conversation online and share your views on critical areas the federal government should be looking at in 2024, and the political standoffs still hovering around Nigeria's political landscape. That's so much for you watching this week. Thank you very much. Have a fantastic 2024. I am Kayla Megwa. See you next time.